We see a thematic connection of the American dream between our work of literary merit, The Great Gatsby, and our contemporary work, The Kite Runner. In both works, the idea of the American dream is devalued by the characters and their unconscious thoughts and actions.
In The Great Gatsby, Tom Buchanan represents the id, Jay Gatsby represents the ego, and Nick Carraway represents the superego. Tom is the id because he operates on his pleasure principle, rarely thinking about how his actions may affect others. For instance, he has a mistress, Myrna Wilson, to adhere to his immediate wants and desires that Daisy cannot fulfill in his eyes. Gatsby is the ego because he knows that he wants to live a life of excess and luxury, which is what will bring him pleasure, but he must balance that with discipline to bring himself to the top. Nick is the superego because he disciplines himself too much and rarely takes the risk that he truly desires. For example, Jordan Baker shows interest in Nick, but he holds back because he feels as if she is too impressive and too famous for him.
In The Kite Runner, Amir represents the id, Baba represents the ego, and Hassan represents the superego. Amir acts as the embodiment of the id by striving to satisfy his basic needs and immediate gratifications. For instance, Amir does anything to achieve approval from his father, which is shown when he frames Hassan. Baba is the best representation of the ego because of his adequate job of relegating his id-like desires and being a mature adult. He delays his gratifications in situations like being a father to Hassan because he knows his actions were irresponsible and it would be a continuation of his irresponsibility to openly claim Hassan as his son due to the shame it would bring upon his family and friends. Hassan is the ideal superego because of his constant life choices of doing the right thing and continually standing up for Amir. For example, when he retrieved Amir's kite and got assaulted, he did not say anything and just kept being loyal to Amir and his family.
In The Great Gatsby, Jay Gatsby nearly attains the American dream, but falls short due to the fact that the American dream represents an abstract concept that cannot be defined quantitatively. However, most people are likely to characterize it as working hard, achieving one's goals, having a nice home, and being financially stable. Because it is impossible to know when one is at present living the supposed American dream, Jay Gatsby never achieves it, and he dies before he feels fulfilled.
In The Kite Runner, Amir feels that if he comes to the United States, he will be rich, happy, and all that comes with the dream. However, he is unable to attain the American dream because of his culture and race. He is an outsider. The societal standards in Afghanistan are much different than those in the United States. His wealth that he had in Afghanistan does not translate into wealth in the United States. Because of this unattainable dream of his, he feels unfulfilled until he decides that it is no longer important to him, and that the earthly possessions do not matter as much as he initially thought.
The theme of the American dream connects to the transformative power of literature because it can be applied to different times and situations. The Great Gatsby is set in the 1920s, while The Kite Runner is based in the early 2000s. The American dream has been a part of the culture of the United States for at least 100 years, and many works of literature can be connected through this idea.
Literature is a part of everyday life. It helps shape who we are. Without it, we would just think and be like everyone else. We wouldn't have any individuality. The power of literature influences our everyday actions and opinions. If there was no literature in the world, no one would recognize any cultural or religious differences. For example, The Great Gatsby and The Kite Runner both highlight the downfall and flaws of the American dream, yet both have drastically different cultural and religious backgrounds. The ability for these works of literature to tell completely different stories, yet have the same power to convey a message, truly represents the transformative power of literature in these two novels. In Freud's model of psychoanalysis, he divided the mind into two main parts, the conscious and unconscious mind, which are sectioned off into the id, ego, and superego. The ego represents the conscious mind, while the id and superego operate in the unconscious. The unconscious mind works constantly to affect decision-making in everyday life. Here's an example. When you first start learning to drive, you have to pay really close attention and make a conscious effort to complete each action, turning on the blinker, changing lanes, checking your mirrors. But as you become more experienced, you begin to take these actions almost automatically, even while multitasking like listening to music or talking on the phone. And driving becomes second nature. This is the unconscious mind at work. While the conscious mind is responsible for performing tasks, the unconscious mind is responsible for most actions. Reflexes are a simple example of this. You may accidentally touch a stove and quickly pull your hand away before you even realize what is happening. Your unconscious mind knows that such a high temperature is dangerous and will try to protect you before you get hurt. The same can be true in social situations. If you get into a situation where you are embarrassed, your conscious mind will want to forget it,
but it will remain stored in the unconscious and will almost certainly affect your actions in a similar situation in the future. Jay Gatsby's unconscious leads him to make many decisions throughout his life which may have been different if he was conscious of the reasoning behind them. He spends years building himself up as a bootlegger with an air of mysterious grandeur, still believing that he can be with Daisy and live happily ever after. He refrains from telling anyone about his past, in part because he has become wealthy illegally, but also because his unconscious is trying to protect him from further emotional trauma by distancing him from others. It should be noted that Gatsby has few, if any, close relationships in the novel. Growing up, my mom was the third youngest of 14 siblings, something which has affected her throughout her life in ways which she never realized. For example, with 13 siblings, there was rarely an excess of food in the house, and if she didn't eat all of what she was served, she wouldn't have any left over to eat later. As a result of this upbringing, she lives a very frugal lifestyle. She pays close attention to where she buys groceries, always looking for the best price or best sale. She never leaves uneaten food on her plate, and will often eat until she feels sick just so that she doesn't waste any food. Despite having plenty of food in our house, my mom is always worried about having enough to eat and saving what food isn't eaten for lunch or a snack the next day. While these aren't necessarily negative actions, my mom doesn't think about them or contemplate why she needs to save food. It is her unconscious mind which is dictating this behavior, just as it dictates the behavior of each and every one of us.
The id is known as the pleasure principle. It is almost like the childlike impulse of our minds. Particularly in young children, the id is quite prominent. During our childhood, we have not yet developed a steady logic principle, nor have we developed a balance between pleasure and logic. Luckily, as we mature, we are able to control these impulses and act properly in a functioning society. I have seen the id in my two younger stepsisters. Olivia is 10 years old and McKinley is 8. After living with them for about 3 years, I see the impulse on a daily basis. Not only do they continually function on their immediate pleasure principle by demanding for a snack at any given moment, but they tend to put each other down to feel better about themselves. Just the other day, I was going to dinner with my family. McKinley turned to Olivia and said, "Olivia, I'm better than you." "Why?" she replied. "I have a school named after me and a mountain. What do you have?" "Nothing." Later, Olivia started complaining that she had to sit in the far back seats by asking, "Why do I have to sit in the back?" McKinley replied, "Because you just have to. Suck it up." And later, Olivia was trying to give her mom something in the front seat, but she had to pass it through me or McKinley to get it to her. She refused to give it to McKinley. She only wanted me to take it. After they bickered for at least a minute about if I or McKinley should take it, it ended up with McKinley shouting, "Shut up," to Olivia. To my stepmom, that's equivalent to the worst curse word. Granted, these kids are quite sassy and rude, more so than others, particularly McKinley, who, may I remind you, is the younger one. But it is evident that they both say or do whatever comes to mind, no matter if it is appropriate or not. Adults and children alike have first reactions and immediate impulses to everything that happens to us. The only difference is that adults have the ability to control these urges. Children allow us to understand the id more deeply. They are the purest form of it. They have not lived on this earth long enough to develop anything past it. For me, I certainly feel as if I see the extreme form of the id in Olivia and McKinley every day. In The Kite Runner, Amir's determination to keep as best a relationship as possible with Baba leads him to frame Hassan, who has only treated Amir with loyalty and respect. As Amir represents the id, this is an impulse reaction for a temporary pleasure that will have emotional consequences later. All of us, even as young adults, make these mistakes sometimes. No one has a perfect conscience, so we all act on impulse from time to time. However, with brain development comes the ability to control it, unlike children who never know when to stop. In The Kite Runner, we see Amir struggle with the emotional consequences from blaming Hassan. Hassan has always been a loyal friend to Amir, making it easy to take advantage of him, but also making him feel even worse about doing it. In order to achieve the American dream, one has to act with moderation between pleasure and logic, or the id and the superego. If you only function on impulse and do things because they sound good, you'll fall on your face when you get ahead of yourself. Alternatively, if you function only on logic, you will never take the risks to get to your ultimate goal. The ego must play a huge role in achieving your final destination. But as we said earlier, is the American dream even real? And if it is it possible for one who operates on the id to achieve it? I say no. The American dream is too abstract to be defined. To put a blanket statement over it, it is simply being happy with your life and what you have become in America. But where do you stop? Do you stop at a house that is sufficient for you and your family? Or do you stop at a big and luxurious house? Do you stop at a well-paying job that allows you to live comfortably? Or do you stop at a high-paying 6-figure job? This is where it gets vague. When do you completely fulfill everything that the American dream embodies? You could never possibly know. As for the id, frankly, it is quite hard to get anywhere operating on the id. To function in an adult world, you need logic with impulse. Simply acting before thinking may result in serious consequences. For Amir, he found himself in deep emotional turmoil from the moment he frames Hassan until the end of the novel. If he acted for these immediate gratifications throughout his entire life, he would find that he is getting nowhere. Fortunately, for Olivia and McKinley, they have time to grow and develop a logic to counteract their impulses, which will allow them to maneuver through life more smoothly. And fortunately, again, they have time to decide what they want to achieve in life. They get to decide their own happiness, not dictated by the American dream.
The ego is the part of our personality that allows us to consciously make decisions. We find a balance between our intellectual... Can I start over? I just said intellectual and I meant instinctual.
Yeah, that's good.
Okay. The ego is the part of our personality that allows us to consciously make decisions. We find a balance between our instinctual desires, our aspirations and dreams, and the discipline that is required to fulfill those dreams. I have an aunt, Aunt Lenora, who graduated from LSU in the early 1970s with a degree in English and hopes for a future as a writer in New York. I called her and asked her what it was like to move so far away with so few possessions and connections, and found a story that beautifully illustrates one example of how the American dream manifests itself in some cases. Coincidentally, she took a course on dramatic literature of the 20th century with a focus on the American dream. This just goes to show that she is familiar with the American dream through practice in her personal journey, but also through the power of literature. Aunt Lenora grew up alongside her large family. She was one of 9 children in Port Barre, Louisiana, which most people have probably never heard of. She changed her major 3 times, but after considering political science and journalism, she decided to pursue an English degree. Her dad, my grandfather, got her a job at a bank, but she was not interested in banking. She also worked on the student union committee where they planned events for the union at LSU. She met 2 women who were very colorful and worldly and were both married to Greek men. They mentored her in a way, and she talked to them about the possibility of her teaching English in Greece. She knew she wanted to travel and had a passion for literature, but she knew she needed a logical medium to put this plan into action. She felt she must find a balance between her id pleasure principle and her motivation to move towards the superego ideal of perfection. When she was only 19, she decided she would attend a student-sponsored trip to Europe. She applied for a job teaching English in Greece, and she was accepted. She promptly quit her job at the bank and went to Greece, but to her dismay, paperwork got in the way of things, and she was unable to begin teaching right away. She became unsatisfied and decided to come back to the States. Her mother was horrified when she went to New York, because New York was about to go bankrupt. It actually didn't, but it looked like it was going to. However, the American dream involves taking risks. She moved there with hardly any money at all, something that she says would be impossible to do now. She had stopped to see her college friend Stephanie, who was a painter. While she was visiting, Stephanie had a job interview at Women's Wear Daily, and Lenora decided to tag along and interview as well. In the end, Lenora got the job because she could type and Stephanie could not. Stephanie got a job upstairs though, so it was okay. She soon learned that living in New York was gritty. Her first job paid about $86 a week after taxes. She laughed as she told me that she basically lived like a pauper. Her ego influenced her, and she knew she had to give up certain luxuries so that she could have more later in life. She also noted that it was difficult to become confident in a new city. Stephanie warned her not to look people in the eye. Many people were in New York to fulfill their American dream, and they didn't want people getting in the way of that end goal. She told me that New York has changed very much since the 70s because it was dirtier and rougher, but she was in her 20s and was full of vivacity, and she thought it was cool. Still, she would go to bed around 8:30 most nights because Stephanie was her only contact in the city, and it could be very lonely at times. She worked hard at WWD for about 5 months, rewriting her boss's letters because he had poor grammar, and she did not feel content. She knew a woman who worked there who was about 30 years old and had a master's degree, but was a secretary. She wanted to become a serious writer so she could influence people through literature, the same way she had been influenced. She knew that she would not get there by doing desk work. She learned that at the time, if you worked at a university, you received free tuition, so she got a job at NYU's law school. She made many friends there and had young bosses who were very interesting. She always loved English, drama, and politics because she felt they had a sense of urgency, which was also present in the demonstrations she had participated in while at LSU. She told me that in drama, every opening night is like a deadline you have to make, and there is that same sense of alluring urgency. This urgency followed her as she pursued the American dream and pushed herself to her limits to achieve the life she pictured. She also felt that she wanted to make a political impact, which is something playwrights and actors often do. She wasn't quite sure what she wanted to study, but she was certain she did not want to be a 30-year-old with a master's degree working as a secretary. She was ambitious. Eventually, she decided to pursue a master's degree in drama. She was, and still is, very passionate about art and literature because it has the power to affect perspective. She has almost never doubted that she chose the right path. She has traveled all around the world, from Italy to Singapore, Japan to Cambodia, and is a Purchase College professor and playwright. She has a loving husband and a daughter who recently graduated from Boston College. She is satisfied with her outcome in life and has worked very hard to achieve her goals. Aunt Lenora concluded that the American dream is the idea that you can grow from a difficult position. You can be an immigrant, or you can be penniless, and you can rise up through hard work and make the life you want for yourself. However, she asserts that sometimes the American dream can be thwarted by capitalism. She cited The Death of a Salesman, where the protagonist has been a top salesman, but is now old news because he has been less successful. She pointed out that sometimes, as dreary as it is, you're only as good as your last sale. You can break out of your class unlike some other countries, but the dream is still built on capitalism and money. Her ego allowed her to find moderation in everything she did, so that she could have the life she wanted in a realistic and attainable way.
The superego is the ethical component of human personality, and it helps give the moral boundaries and standards that the ego operates through. Essentially, it is the moral compass of everyone's personality. It represents internalized ideals and provides standards for judgment and for future aspirations. In The Kite Runner, Hassan is the clearest and most accurate representation of Freud's superego. Hassan and his actions transcend the actions of everyone else in the novel. He is constantly protecting Amir and others throughout the novel that don't need or deserve his love and devotion. He operates through standards that are preset by his societal class. His standing in society already causes him to be the better person and to act as though others are superior. Hassan's role as a mere servant forces him to recognize the fact that he constantly has to serve others and put others before himself. Furthermore, his selfless love and devotion to Amir and Baba, and his complete moral transcendence of his thoughts and actions throughout the novel prove that Hassan is the superego in this novel. My grandma, Linda Bro Erker, or Lily for short, is a real-life exemplification of Hassan. She is selfless in her love with her family and friends. She acts on a moral compass that is so pure and innocent that it seems to be fake. She is the most generous and giving person I know. However, her life hasn't always been butterflies and rainbows. She comes from a town called Roe, Louisiana, and grew up living off the wages earned by her father, who owned a local grocery store. She grew up as the oldest of 3 girls who were 4 and 14 years younger than her. She also began working in her family store at around age 12. Throughout the first 18 years of her life, she had to put others before herself, and basically had to raise her 2 younger siblings as if they were her own, if she wasn't working in the store. They were not wealthy, and in the high-class society they always aspired to be in, but through hard work and the help of my grandmother and her efforts, her family always made ends meet somehow. So, for what basically was her entire childhood and adolescent life, she was always serving and developing a sense of moral obligation to others. When she was 18 years old, she began attending Louisiana State University in Baton Rouge, Louisiana. In those few years that she attended college, Lily had begun to experience real freedom, where she was unattached and only had to take care of herself. However, that did not last very long. In the middle of her first year of college, she met my grandfather, and by the end of her second year, she had dropped out, which was socially acceptable in the 1960s, and had married him. Yet, by 1976, she had 2 children and was a single mother. In the short span of 12 years, my grandmother had gone from only having to feed and care for herself to having to feed and care for herself and 2 children, all without help. My grandmother raised my uncle and my mother the best she could. She found a job at the local courthouse as a judge's secretary and saved enough money to be able to send my uncle and my mother to a private Catholic school in order to give them the best education possible. She sacrificed countless material goods and opportunities to make sure her children could live the best lives possible. She raised them to be well-rounded and to have a sense of moral obligation and willingness to serve others like she has. Her attitude and willingness to serve has only continued to grow as she got older. With the arrival of her 4 grandchildren, she has shown immense love and sincerity towards us. She has always tried to be there for me and has always loved me unconditionally. She's always trying to make my life better than hers and is always trying to aid me, whether it is emotional, financial, or physical. She's constantly showering my sisters and cousins with love and presents and anything and everything that children could ever want or need. She also helps out my mother and uncle as often as she can because she understands what it is like raising children and having to work. But her biggest action of selflessness is her willingness to live and continually care for her 94-year-old mother and my great-grandmother. However, Lily has always wanted more. She has always aspired to be a high-class elite socialite. She has spent her life believing if she saved enough money or wore the right clothes or said the right things, her dreams of being in high-class society would come true. This aspiration is essentially the concept of the American dream. As defined earlier, the American dream is the idea that with hard work and a good attitude, financial success and aspirations will occur. Unfortunately for my grandmother, she experienced what is more common, the un-American dream. This dream is one that essentially states that hard work and saving money and doing everything that's right does not equal monetary success in high-class society. Furthermore, similar to Hassan's situation, because of my grandmother's standing in society earlier on in life, her superego qualities, her American dream was not achieved. She was not part of high society who went out every weekend to fancy high-end restaurants and gossiped about little nothings, and Hassan was not a member of the elite within the Afghan society where he could be treated with the respect he deserved. Yet the failure of these dreams did not make them stop loving and caring for their family and friends. It only made that love and care develop and become stronger throughout their lives. The realization that the American dream is not an attainable concept caused them to grow within their superego personalities and live their lives in service to others instead of in service to the American dreams.
From this thesis work, the power of literature allowed us to clearly see the theme of the American dream in different pieces of work.
By psychoanalyzing these two books and our own life situations, we see that the American dream is, in fact, not real or concrete, but an abstract concept that truly cannot be defined.
Though Aunt Lenora found herself where she wants to be, this is because she is not blinded by a greed to obtain more than she originally desired.
This can make it difficult for people to know when to stop and be satisfied with where they have come.